sea, mountains into the sea.
Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Wiley Cash. In today's episode, we talk with Michael Parker about his latest novel, I Am the Light of This World, which is the September selection of the Our State Book Club.
Mountains in the sea.
So Michael, thank you for joining us again from your beautiful home here in Durham, right in the middle of everything. So I'm the Light of This World, September selection of the Our State Book Club. Can you tell us a little bit about this novel? You know, main characters, a little bit of what the story's about, and kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can tell you more about the character than I can where the idea came from, because I'm a firm believer in the notion that if the idea is good, you really don't know where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very mysterious. I can tell you how this book got started. I was writing a book about a boy and his twin brothers at a 4-H camp in Central Texas, and it wasn't working at all as a story. And then there was a line or two about the boy, how poor they were, and how the kerosene, the smell of the kerosene sort of stayed on their coats, which were given to them sort of by charities, like Kiwanis coats for Kids for Coats Drive or something. And that line stayed with me, and I just started writing about this boy, whose name is Earl, who is, always sort of present, minimally present.
Very minimally in the novel.
Right. And also elsewhere, very much elsewhere, so that his sensibility is highly attuned, highly associative, highly imagistic. You really have to sort of pay attention to the images and the things that he notices and the things that he hears in order to understand him. And in some ways that becomes the narrative drive of the book. It's like a cumulative effect of all the things that he hears and sees. I mean, that's true of every character to an extent, but in this book it sort of drives the plot.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And the plot is, Earl's growing up in, is it East Texas?
East Texas.
And then he, meets a young woman who convinces him to go into Austin to on an errand that ends up being not quite the errand that it's promised to be. And things go sideways pretty quickly. And I love what you just said about it being cumulative. This is really a very classically chronological novel, because Earl is not really a rememberer. He's not. He may be triggered to remember during a interrogation, perhaps, but he is definitely a forward mover chronologically. But you also said that he is often elsewhere in his mind. And this novel, the first half was so funny and so meandering in a very interesting way. And then something happens at the halfway point that is so stunning. And the rest of the novel is the domino, of that falling. And the novel, it feels like a tale of two novels in some ways. Were you aware of that when you were writing it? Or did you get to a point where it just kind of tipped? I mean, the memory of writing it, what was it that you were working at?
Well, first of all, I wrote the first draft in a manic blur of maybe 3.5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Of really not much sleep. And
were you just trying to get it out?
I had no choice.
Yeah.
I hate to think of this, because I always told my students, you're not the vessel, you're not channeling a character, you're not just transcribing something, you're actively working and making choices as you write. Again, this is one of those do as I say things, right? Yeah. Where I just was taken over by Earl, by his thought process, by the things that he saw, and the way that music led into his life. And he would kind of go from song to song, and that would tell the story of his deeper desires. I don't know how I got to that point where things sort of shifted. I can't really remember that, but I do remember thinking, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is really gone in a place where I didn't see it going.
Yeah, the reader will feel the same. And what I found so amazing was tonally, to shift the tone of a novel and have it still be the same novel in every conceivable way. I mean, this is not two books glued together. This is an intact novel with this major tonal shift that I just marveled at, just how you pulled that off. So 3.5 weeks of not sleeping is all it took. For my next one, I'm going to do that. Music plays a really important role in the novel, and you talked about how Earl, this young guy who eventually grows into a middle-aged man in the novel, but he is kind of induced and hypnotized by music, and it takes him kind of out of the physical realm into this very experiential place. And what is the trigger is his memories of first hearing slide guitar.
All right. Yeah.
So can you talk about the role of music in this novel, and if any biographical, in the last episode we talked about Leadbelly, talking about guitar, any biographical stuff that your own love for music, your own passion for music went into this character?
Yeah. Well, I think he has a really rough life. Mm-hmm. His home life is not good. His father has a group of misfits who come around and play music and sing Hank Williams songs. Mm-hmm. One of the earliest memories he has is of his father teaching him the words to "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." Mm-hmm. So that his good memories are associated with music, and especially the pedal steel, which he feels is
pedal steel guitar. I said slide guitar.
Close, very close, yeah. But that same sort of slide guitar and pedal steel have the same sort of shimmery, not quite real, not quite notes, mm-hmm. but it's very ethereal.
Yeah.
And so I think he really relates to that just because of his consciousness being pitched the way it is. Mm-hmm. That was my youth. I mean, I lived for music, and in the same way we now live for us. I live for the new book that I'm reading that's going to teach me something that's going to take me away from from my living room. The same thing with the new album. Yeah. Right. Sometimes the movies. Yeah. So I kind of still live from book to book to album to just to sort of enrich my life, and I've been doing that forever. And so I think he did the same thing in that music was not just a sort of escape for him, but it was a way of articulating things he could not articulate.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the sound of pedal steel guitar has this shimmer to it. And so does his consciousness. These shimmers are almost like these portals through which his memory can pass. And there's all these returns in the book. There's these returns to East Texas. There's the return to the sound of his mother on the phone talking to her sister.
Right.
All these portals that go back and back and back. And it's just really, it's kind of this amorphous experience of moving through Earl's life. Right. Which was really seductive as a reader to be able to do.
I don't think he's capable of a kind of coherent, linear, straightforward movement.
Yeah.
Like in terms of his thought, in terms of what he has in his heart. Mm-hmm. It's all predicated on like snatching these moments and replaying them and rethinking them as a mode of survival. Yeah. As a mode of going forward. And that just sort of calcifies and solidifies after what happens, mm-hmm. that thing that happens. Yeah. And I will say he spends a long time in prison for something that he didn't do. Yeah. I mean, that's not giving away too much.
And I think it's so interesting that the chronology of the novel marches ahead very kind of lockstep. I mean, there's a close accounting of time. The novel closely accounts for time, but Earl cannot. And so you have two levels of time management going on at once. You have his intellectual, experiential time management and then real time. And to try to marry those two together, was that difficult to do in the writing, or is that a revision thing you go and...
Yeah, it was a revision thing, but as soon as I figured out that those two things were sort of in contrast to each other, mm-hmm. I understood that's where the tension was.
Yeah, okay.
So that's
cool.
Sort of playing around with that is what caused a lot of the tension and moved the story forward. That kind of strife, mm-hmm. Once you find that, then you just play with it.
You got your narrative. Once you got your tension, you got your narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Michael Parker. For all you lovers of North Carolina music, my buddies, the Steep Canyon Rangers, have a new album out right now. What makes this one different? Well, it's a live double album recorded last fall at the beautiful Greenfield Lake Amphitheater in Wilmington, North Carolina. The band's live shows have become legendary, and on this night, the Rangers were in top form. How do I know? Well, for one, I've heard the record. Second, I was there in person that night. And now, when you listen to the Steep Canyon Rangers' new Live from Greenfield Lake, you'll feel like you were there too. This podcast is produced by Our State Magazine, celebrating North Carolina travel, food, history, and culture since 1933. Check out ourstate.com, where you can explore exclusive content like digital stories, YouTube videos, newsletters, and more. To have each month's issue delivered to your mailbox, visit ourstate.com/subscribe and enter promo code BOOKCLUB, one word, BOOKCLUB. That's BOOKCLUB for $5 off any regular or gift subscription. We are back with Michael Parker. Michael, over the course of your life, you've been very physically active, and this may be a shock to our listeners and viewers, but not a lot of writers are. But you know, you've got a history of biking, running, trail running, swimming. Do you see a connection between your physical discipline and your writing discipline?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, they're very connected. I mean, when I was living in Texas, there was always a big question was, in the summer, which is 9 months out of the year.
Yeah.
The question is, do I get up and do my work, or do I go out and run? Yeah. Because the longer it gets in the day, the later it gets in the day, the hotter it gets. Mm-hmm. And in the morning, it's super humid. Like the humidity levels are 90%. Yeah. And it could be like 90 degrees when you wake up in the summer. And, but I would rather run then before the sun comes up, then wait till it gets 105. Yeah. So there's a lot of like calculation. Like, should I run now? And then I just end up getting up earlier and earlier, to where I'm getting up at 3:30 sometimes to write, and going to bed at 8, or I would take a lot of naps. Yeah. As often people do in really hot places. Yeah. I'm a big believer in the siesta. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're running, especially on trail running or swimming now, which you're doing more of, are you thinking about your writing? Are you thinking about the problem back at the desk when you're doing that?
I do more so now that I'm swimming, long distances. When I was running, I had to constantly be looking down. Mm-hmm. If you're trail running, you're always looking down at the trail. So, I mean, you're in some sort of psychic space where you're not really paying attention, but you're sort of paying attention. But I always did. I mean, I ran on pavement for years, and I would think about my work, especially while I was riding my bike, way out in the country.
And just puzzle through things, or?
Yeah, sentences come to you.
Yeah. So, you're undoubtedly a North Carolina author, but several of your recent works were set out west. Right. And you lived in Texas for a handful of years. How did that post-UNC Greensboro move to Texas influence your writing?
Well, I was writing... I guess I wrote 2 books before I left UNCG that were set either fully or partially in Texas, because I had been living in both Austin and Greensboro for a number of years, maybe 5 or 6, going back and forth. I'm the only man alive who summered in Texas. I wouldn't advise it. But I mean, Texas, the landscape is so different from Central Texas at least, is so different from what I grew up with. And the landscape is hugely important to me, and a huge source of tension in any story, and an embodiment of character. So once I became accustomed to like West Texas, especially the desert, and parts of Central Texas, the hill country, it couldn't help but mold my characters, shape my characters in ways that I hadn't thought of them before. Sure. Yeah. Because really, weather, climate, landscape, it all has a tremendous effect on how we think and how we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially with the more recent awareness, and you can feel it permeating our literature, especially here in the South, an awareness of impending environmental concerns,
Exactly.
storms, droughts,
Right.
fires. You can feel those things kind of coming for us on the edges of our writing.
Yeah.
So it is now time for another North Carolina lightning round. And my first question has to do with Texas. What did you miss most about North Carolina while you lived out in Austin?
I would say the ocean. I miss the ocean. There's an ocean down in Texas, but I don't want to insult any Texans. But if you're used to
nice
the
and
Atlantic-
oily and
yeah, it's a brown. I'm not really down with that.
Yeah,
Seaweedy
yeah.
and there's oil derricks out there. I just couldn't get used to it.
Yeah.
I only went down there a couple times.
Yeah. Where do you go to the beach when you're in North Carolina?
Topsail mostly.
Okay.
I grew up
Topsail's
going to
so
Topsail.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Great
Ocean
bookstore.
Isle,
in
Emerald
Topsail.
Isle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are now living in Durham. You've been in Durham for 2 years? 3
Yeah,
years?
almost a year and a half. Yeah.
What surprised you the most about being in Durham? Or what have you enjoyed the most?
Well, I think, how urban it is, really. I mean, I guess I grew up, living all those years in Greensboro, it didn't feel that urban, even though I lived in a neighborhood that was right adjacent to downtown. But just the walkability here, I can walk 10 minutes and be on 9th Street, and there's restaurants, and I can get downtown really easily, and there's more people out on the street. There's more bars that have outdoor patios, very much like Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of Austin, what Austin used to be everyone says that about Austin. Oh, it's not like it used to be, but when I went there in 2008, it had a very different feel.
Where is your favorite place? I would ask you your favorite place to run, but you told us your favorite place is up north of Greensboro. Those miles there. Where's your favorite place to vacation in North Carolina? If not Topsail.
I'd say Topsail.
Topsail, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also go to Emerald Isle a lot. I used to go down there because you can ride your bike, because there's like a 40 miles, or you can have like a shoulder, like a bike lane.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really great riding, but I don't ride my bike much. But Topsail, it has my heart. I went there a lot when I was growing up. I had a real good friend who had a cottage down there, so we go down there for part of the summer.
Yeah, well, shout out to Quarter Moon Books in Topsail.
Yeah,
great little bookstore down there. Well, Michael, this has been such a pleasure. The book is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wiley. I appreciate it.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit, never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be, will you see? Sweeter fruit, never tasted, don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea, mountains into the sea. Mountains